Welcome back, people. Welcome back, Doug.
Welcome.
Welcome to the December edition of the Precision Teaching Podcast. And
the end of the year version.
The end of the year version. Can you believe it?
9 flew by.
2009 flew by. And it went by so fast that I don't know. I'm trying to think of something pithy and clever to say, but I can't. So
It'll be 2011 before you know it.
Yeah, probably. Well, let's, I guess we kind of jumped into our announcement a little bit, and that is Happy Holidays, everybody.
Yes, Happy Holidays.
This is the end of the year, and Doug and I are podcasting this after Christmas, yet before New Year's. And this is always a good time to celebrate with the family, celebrate with friends, and, of course, celebrate with your local precision teacher, because they need love, too.
Yes.
That could be a new slogan, Hug a Precision Teacher.
There. I was trying to think of something funny there. I couldn't.
Yeah, that happens when you try to put yourself on the spot.
Yeah.
Well, let's move into the year in review. This is, I guess, if we start talking about our podcast, we did pretty good this year. You and I set out to do once a month, and I think we had a podcast every month but one, and that was the month of the month of the conference. Thank you. I couldn't get that out there.
Yeah, because it occurred at the normal time of our podcast thing.
Right. And we can't do two things at once, so something had to give.
No, as Lindley talks about, it's independent, so we really can't do that. We're doing one thing, and sorry.
Yeah, one thing only. But hey, we did pretty good. We have 11 out, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty good. I mean, we have excellent interviews. We reviewed lots of articles. We have a pretty stable format now. We have, we've answered some email questions. I think when we look back in 2009 for our podcasting, we should be very pleased with all the work that we did and all of the people we spoke to and so on.
I hope most importantly, those that are listening have enjoyed it.
Yes, all four of you, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd also say that we have received some positive feedback from people, and we've had some questions too. And what's also nice is there are a few people that challenged us, which is great because we are talking. This podcast comes to you from the perspective that Doug and I bring from what we've learned of precision teaching. And I think we've said this before. If we haven't, I know I'll say it. I'll say it right now. But we don't give the party line for precision teaching. We talk about how we understand precision teaching, the things that we've learned, and our interpretation of the literature. And it's great when people follow up and ask us other questions, because then we get to go back and look at what we're saying and have a nice discussion, and that's how learning occurs.
I think we hope to start or the conversation and are definitely not the last word on the conversation.
Yeah, that's well said, Doug. You should be writing those little things in the Chinese cookies.
My fortune, I don't know, I had a pretty bad fortune, so we won't go into Chinese cookies right now.
All right. We have also had a conference, which we were just referring to, and that was a smashing success. We had a number of people in State College, and there were excellent presentations. The Owen White is on my website, and if you want to see that interview. And, of course, we got a podcast interview out of there. Chart shares were there. The food was great. People were great. What else can we say about the conference?
Well, I could say maybe I'm speaking for a lot of people, but thank you and the others that pulled it together. I think it was a great learning experience, a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed the address on was it the first or second day on the global warming. The
yes.
science presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot remember his name.
Yes.
What was his name again?
That's my colleague, Todd Sowers.
Yes, Todd's presentation was very good.
Yeah, the theme that we were going for at that conference was science, and I love that we had a real scientist, and I love the fact that we have scientist practitioners, so to speak, and I'm glad to hear you say that because I really appreciate that. I love listening to people who are scientists. I'm not sure if people understand, but when you are a scientist in whatever your particular area is, to be an expert, you hone in on whatever that particular, you have that laser-like precision and focus on whatever that area is that you study. I mean, you can't know it all and be an expert on everything. So you're an expert on some things and other things you're well knowledgeable about. And it's just, I love listening to scientists who aren't necessarily in our world talk. It's always very cool.
Well, I know the extension to that, you've got me hooked on a lot of those audiobooks on science, and it's just it's fantastic because you're right. It's individuals who are very precise in their information, but they all come at things from a similar way, let's say. So once you understand that way, you can learn different aspects of what their specific expertise is.
Yeah. Hey, can we get a shout out for science?
Hey, I don't actually know how to do a shout out, but
science, we love you.
Yes.
Well,
you move mountains.
Yeah. Now, let's not get science is, we don't want to get too intimate here.
Okay.
Well, since we are, we're bragging on science, and science is great in that people who are listening to Precision Teaching, we have a technology that reveres science, that uses science, and that's how we make good decisions. A lot of us, I won't say a lot of us, some of us are in education, some of us are in psychology. We have people in different fields, and we take this thing called precision teaching, we apply it, we look at the measuring technology, we find out different things. It tells us if what we're doing is working, not having an effect, that we need to make a change, and we move forward. And that's part and parcel of science. You measure something, you're very precise in your measurement, you look at those effects. Based on those effects, you decide, hey, do we have something here? Do I need to do something? And of course, we have that applied slant to it, so we're looking sometimes for discoveries, but also to manufacture certain behaviors in students. But that's how science works with what we do. And I don't know, I think I could say safely for you and I, we both are so appreciative of science, and that's one of the reasons why we like precision teaching and some of the other things that you and I do as professionals. Am I safe in saying that, Doug?
You are safe in saying that, and I think that'll be I don't know if you had any more year in review statements.
We're still there.
Okay, well then I'll say then I'll stop it. You're safe in saying that.
Also, in the year in review, we have 07 and 08. The journal has been printed, and 09 should have been done, but at least 09 is going to be published probably in January, which means we will be completely up to date with JPTC, Journal of Precision Teaching and Acceleration, and we're back on track. That's another big goal that needed accomplished, and I can proudly say that, hey, we're there.
Round of applause.
Round of applause. There we go.
Boy, those are pretty bad sound effects, but okay.
So what else do we have? Year in review. Journal, precision teaching, conference, podcast. What am I missing? I guess those are pretty big things. Mm-hmm. We have, if we look at the community, I'm sure our participants in the community could probably share a lot of their local successes. We found out at the last conference of public schools doing it, charter schools doing it. That when I say doing it, I'm talking about using precision teaching. And we found more people doing it, such as speech and language pathologists, speech language and therapy pathologists, and so on. A couple OTs that are doing it. So I don't know. '09 was really good for precision teaching. We have to keep moving forward, bringing more people into the fold. We have to keep on doing a good job of disseminating our work. And no, I guess those are the big things to talk about.
Look forward to a very productive and exciting 2010.
Yeah, 2010. We'll have a lot more interviews. We will continue to tweak the show. We may add some other segments into it. We'll see how that works. On the heels of us... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, maybe we could have like a segment that's we ask the audience a question and see what the answers are coming back or something like that.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Like PT trivia or something.
Yeah, we'd probably have to do that, though, somehow with a listserv, or I don't know how we would do that.
I don't know. Hey, brainstorming, you just don't want to stop it. You just let it go.
Yeah, we could just walk along the street and just throw out comments.
Okay.
Well, as I was going to say, speaking on the heels of loving science, why don't we move into our science news?
There you go.
This is a pretty timely article. This was released December 16th, and this article is on learning styles. And you and I we talked about learning styles. We talked about it in a previous podcast, the difference between learning styles and learning channels. And we also had an email comment, someone talking about learning styles. And now we have this article.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an article that is, it's good. This is what, again, if you play the game of science, the way you look at it is you're always reviewing what is the most recent research on something. You never say anything is proven because everything you hold as this is where it's at right now. Anything could be overturned once we get more data. Now, that doesn't mean that there's a high probability something will be overturned, but the more evidence that builds towards a certain conclusion, we tend to accept those things as factual in science. And this is an article where what they did is they looked at the learning styles and they reviewed the evidence and they said, hey, what do we know about learning styles? And what did they find, Doug?
Well, I will start with the second, actually it's the subtitle. There is no evidence supporting auditory and visual learning, psychologists say.
Right.
Basically, in their review, they found that after reviewing, how many studies was it?
They reviewed a lot of studies. No, that's 71 different models of learning styles. That's in the original. Yeah, that's in the original article.
Right. And they found that because the data, the studies have not used the type of randomized research designs that would make their findings credible. So they found that really there was no learning styles.
Yeah, that's, here's, it's interesting the way people are reacting to this. Obviously, the people in the learning styles camp aren't taking this very well because this is saying, hey, this thing that you invested all your time in, guess what? It's not panning out, and here's this review that we did that shows it's not panning out. And I think that's the major thing that they looked at. You need to, in science, whenever you have something, you have to identify what the heck is it that you're studying. And they found, number one, when they reviewed their evidence, there's all types of these different learning styles. So there's not this stable thing that you can look at and define and say, okay, this is this particular type of thing that I'm looking at. And this is the evidence that supports this. Here's all these different studies that are supporting this. And they didn't find that when they were combing all of the evidence for learning styles. That's a pretty major flaw, if you ask me, in something that people are saying, hey, every teacher should be doing this with their kids. We should be assessing their learning styles and then teaching to whatever particular style they are. If you can't figure out what the heck their learning style is in the first place, how does everything that follows work? I don't get that.
No, I don't either. And, we talked about science, and you talked about the data accumulates, and then it's always open to question. And if we took a scientific spin on this, then those that are sort of in that learning styles community should be saying, okay, well, they should take this as a positive, and I don't sense that they are taking it as a positive, to say, okay, well, we need to try some different things. It's almost they just want to take it for granted that they're there, let's deal with them. But what this is saying is, okay, well, no, it's not there. And so they should be taking it from a scientific, okay, well, if it's not there, let's go find out if it is there. So I don't know if that'll be the next step. Perhaps they'll try to design studies that maybe meet these different criteria.
No, they won't. And I'll tell you why.
I didn't think they would.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Because the status quo for them is that the type of research that they generate should be sufficient. And why would they do anything else when it's easy to criticize? I mean, I see this, you can see this in education a lot in our field. In our field, not everyone is a scientist. Not everybody cares about science. And in fact, some people denigrate science. And we have anti-intellectual and anti-scientific people in our field. And when you have those type of people in the field, what is a study? They'll say, okay, well, you know what? If we go ahead and interview 100 teachers and ask them what are their feelings on learning styles, that should be sufficient for us to make decisions based on that positive review. But guess what? That's not the way science. Well, I should take a step back. That is legitimate information, right? We're not going to discard that information, but that type of information cannot do what. And this is what's key here. When they reviewed their studies, they were looking for hardcore experimental designs where there was random assignment, and they didn't talk about single case design. They were holding this up to the standard of randomized controlled studies, but that's okay because that's a really good way to discover information. And they could not find anything that would be that level of experimental evidence. And if you can't get that type of experimental evidence, or if you don't have a body of good single case evidence, you can't say the things that people say in science. You can't make generalizations based on what you find. That's a huge problem.
Huge problem. And I would hope, and I know I said that earlier, I would hope that they would go back to the drawing board, but my guess is exactly, I was going to take it to the next step, and they're probably not going to. And what will happen is they'll hem and haw about these results, nitpick through them, say, well, you know what, you're just anti this, anti that, you're anti-helping kids, or make a lot of nasty statements. But we will see. It's good, however, to see somebody critiquing a body of literature. And I think that's been done in other fields or areas. People have gone in and finally critiqued literature. I think that happened with facilitated communication. And they've found that it doesn't stand up to the level of research. So go ahead.
Well, they've actually done this they've done lit reviews before on learning styles.
Oh, that didn't have this outcome.
Well, no, that did have this outcome. I mean, they've done literature reviews that have shown in the past, hey, look, for example, they've done research studies, lit reviews for learning styles and reading, and they look at matching up what do the studies say with reading achievement and learning styles. And what they find is it's not the ones that, I mean, most of it shows that, hey, if we can figure out what the learning styles are, when we do try to match it up, there's no effect. And, I mean, that's what that says. The other thing that these authors talk about, which, you know, on the same theme, is when you look at those experimental designs, and if you don't have that, later on they say, well, you know what, those that, when they did find studies that used different types of research design, most of those were contradictory and said, you know what, this isn't really panning out in terms of looking at these learning style studies. And that's interesting information when you look at some of the research that they did find that was saying, do we have these preferential ways of learning? And just like, you know, like I said, that research is out there in the reading world. Mm-hmm. I will say this. I don't know if you had a chance to see this. I sent you an article from the Columbus Dispatch, and this is a review of this article. And it's funny listening to these people defend learning styles. So they talk about Robert Sternberg, who's the Dean of Arts and Sciences. He's at Tufts University. That's by Boston. And he says, you know what, they simply have ignored roughly 90% of the literature as not worthy of their serious attention. It certainly makes one's job easier if one simply ignores the bulk of the literature. I mean, you can't have it both ways. These people want to use literature that is, or they want to use evidence. I mean, if you look at evidence, it's on a continuum. You know, you have some evidence, like think about it in terms of 3 tiers. The very first tier is like explore, describe. You can do interviews. You can do observations. You know, you can have case studies. There's not a lot of controls in there. That tells you something. Then the second tier would be correlational type of information. You know, that's a little stronger. You can maybe say some more things. The top tier is experimental research. That gives us the most information. Well, this body of learning styles is not at that top tier. And I'm sorry, but if you're in the game of science, this is what the literature says, and this is yet another study talking about learning styles. And I guess I get a little passionate about this because it's just like one of those things that we have to keep dealing with in education that probably will never go away.
Nope. And let's throw it out there. I think they say it in here too. It's there. People are trying to have the student's best interest.
Sure.
I just think and I don't think these are evil people.
No, sir.
They may be tied to a sort of an idea or research, and it validates what they do. But the idea is, if the data isn't there, data aren't there, then the data aren't there.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up. We could probably talk about this for another hour, but I suppose we should move on. But before we do move on, I'll just say what you said and agree that the people who are in education aren't necessarily, they're not bad people that are trying to do bad by children. They're just seriously misguided, and they believe in things, and their filter for evidence is very different from other people in science. And that's, you have people believing things and propagating things that aren't necessarily the best for students, even though they love kids and probably have kids that go through the system and so on.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about our article and review. And our article review is a wonderful article written by Ogden Lindsley. And Lindsley's article is called Our Aims, Discoveries, Failures, and Problem. And what he did, this was written in, I think this is 1990. It was in the Journal of Precision Teaching. And what Ogden did here is he talked about things that precision teachers set out, their aims, set out to discover. What did they discover? What were some failures? And, the problem that arose from all of this information. There's 1,000 things we could talk about, but I'm going to let you go first, Doug. What struck you when you were reading this article?
You, but,
that's fine. I can talk, but I'm. You don't want me to keep going.
No, I do. I enjoy listening to you. Actually, well, let's see. Do you want to approach this? There is a lot of things to talk about in here. Do you want to approach this in a sort of a wheelie-neely format, or do you want to kind of take it from front to back?
Yeah, let's go from front to back. So, I mean, our aims is pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting about the discovery section?
It's hard because a lot of these I know, and I'm sure a lot of those that are listening know. It's nice to see them again in print. It's nice to see, both of us are in behavior analysis again, that behavior is specific and not generalized, that if you're going to want to see behaviors in other environments, you have to actually teach those behaviors in those environments. So, and we could go in and talk about the ABA perspective, but it's looking here. And then probably the one that I'm dealing with right now, in fact, in one research I'm working with, is the idea that behavior is independent, not dependent, and that students can increase on, just because I'm doing more correct of something, I could also be doing more incorrect of something as I'm increasing my rate. And I'm dealing with that right now with a few students. I'm working on repeated reading, and they're starting to speed up, and their errors are also starting to speed up. So, accelerate. So that was something. I could go through a lot of these, so go ahead, take a turn here.
Well, you hit two things that were important. The independent, the behavior is independent, not dependent. I think that's a great point, and it bugs the crap out of me when people do not show their errors. I mean, you see a lot of that in the CBM literature. A lot of CBM graphs just show corrects, not the incorrects. But that's underlying assumption that, if these corrects are going up, well, then we don't have to worry the corrects are going down. That's hugely important. One thing that I love is his section on behavior multiplies. I mean, I'm working on an article where I'm talking about the standard acceleration chart, and I'm actually looking at ratio charts or semi-logarithmic charts versus add, subtract, or equal interval linear charts. And what he says here is just so important for us. Behavior is proportional and almost always changing. So why are we not using charts that show behavior that show it in its proportional changing nature? And he's right. Thinking about behavior multiplying and dividing is where our head should be, but that's not where we're at as a field. And even beyond a field, that's just not where we're at when in most disciplines. I mean, we talk about precision teaching, behavior analysis. We go into psychology, sociology, whatever. People aren't thinking like that. And one thing that I highlighted, everything you look at about behavior is proportional or a multiple. Behavior lives in the multiply world. If you look for behavior in the add world, you will not find it, and will not know why you didn't. I just love that comment. The other thing I'll talk about is, we could talk about all of these things, but behavior, behavior is consequated, not caused. And that is something that, again, if you're a teacher and you're looking at behavior, you need to look at what are the consequences. At the end of this short paragraph, he says, behavior is pushed from its rear, not pulled from the front. What immediately follows the behavior is what maintains it. Very critical. We need to look at those consequences, and again, thinking about that is, I just loved it. So he talks about more things that are really good here. He talks about daily practice. He talks about fluency. Yes, yes, and yes.
Yes.
How about our failures?
I think the one that I use the most is, I think it's still a failure. Is it the child knows best? I'm trying to think sure it's in the right section.
Yes, he did say that.
I think that is, we take that for granted as precision teachers. We take that for granted when working with kids. But when you begin to when you're working one-on-one, you do make those changes. What happens, even in my class that I teach, even when you begin working with groups of people, if they're not getting it, you immediately want to blame them. And the idea of coming back and saying, you know what, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. What can I do to change? What can I do to impart on them? How can I involve them in their learning? Those kind of aspects. And it just reminds you of that, because I do walk around and I use what he talks about here in Skinner's phrase, the rat knows best, and the students all get a laugh. But I don't know if that one really just jumped out to me.
Yeah, the bigger issue in this section is him looking at not just that, but looking at the way precision teaching is going into the academic sphere. That early on, there were less authors, there were more kids' behavior, and he points out across time that there become less and less kids in kids counting and charting their own behavior, and more other people doing it. And he says at the end, where have all the children gone under the teachers' microscopes? I think that you and I are probably a little guilty of this, in that we set up conditions where we measure children's behavior, and because that's how we conduct science. Mm-hmm. We could do things differently, and you and I have talked about conducting things differently. And I don't know, maybe I'm being not very fair to some of the way we do research, but certainly earlier on, I think what he's saying is there were more in that discovery phase. There wasn't so much application of the scientific method necessarily, but more of, hey, we're doing this with these kids, and these kids are going to recount, they're going to report what they're doing, and that's not necessarily how we're conducting research. Does that sound fair?
Yes, it does sound fair. It's hard, but I think that we were on the right track in the past of talking about involving children more in that process. And I think that in and of itself has a lot, I think, can show even practitioners and academians that, that's important to show that children can be involved in that, even in a research way.
Yes.
So.
He calls this a failure, but I would probably argue a little bit that this is not necessarily a failure. You don't want one or the other. You want them both. And, speaking from a scientific, as a scientist practitioner, as a scientist, you want to sometimes put kids under the microscope because you want to discover these functional relations. And it's much harder if you don't have controls and, you're not doing, and I'm not saying necessarily you need to do this in a laboratory setting. You can conduct really good research in kids' classrooms. You can discover information in data that would be valuable for people, but it's a different form of doing research. So he is right that there is more of the academic slant in precision teaching, but I don't know that that's necessarily a failure or necessarily a bad thing. But I certainly can admit that in doing research, that's really a lot how I conduct my research. So
right.
That was a good point. Well, let's see what else. He talked about behaviorgrams, which I thought was kind of neat, where you would have these one-page descriptions of classroom reports. And I like that because if you work with teachers, when teachers get home from school, the last thing they want to do is say, I wonder if I should write up this article and blah, blah, blah. No, they're not going to do that. But having a nice little short one page, like, hey, I discovered this thing that really works, and sharing that with people. How awesome would that be if you and I had access to 100 teachers who are out there doing precision teaching? Then from what we do, we would be able to go in and say, let's try and study this.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, if you don't validate it through research, it's really hard to make firm statements about what you have. It's like clinical data. Hey, I know this person is doing this thing that really works with these kids. Well, that's great, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody.
Right.
Anything else in that section?
Just reminding us to talk in plain English.
Yes.
And I think I'm 50-50 on that. I think sometimes I do speak in plain English, and sometimes I get a little technical, and I don't need to be. So, always things to improve on.
Yes.
I guess we can move up to current successes.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, well.
What?
I was going to say, actually, from our conference, there were some current successes. So this was, 19 years ago that these were current successes, and I think that there's some current successes that we spoke to in our interview. Was that last month?
Yes.
Okay. And so that could have been added here too. So
yeah, I think if you look at, if we go 19 years in the past to now and we compare, we do have some public schools that are doing precision teaching. I don't know what the proportion would be comparing it to 1990. And the same thing with the private nonprofit. A lot of these nonprofits are still operating as far as I know. Morningside's still open for business. Ben Berens is still going on. You know, Houghton, I'm not sure what she's doing, what Elizabeth is doing, but there are other places too that are doing things, and that's great.
Mm-hmm. So those are always, and hopefully will continue to be a success, or be a success.
Yes.
All right.
Any
time to talk?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Talk about the problem, Doug.
This was great. The no learning commissions.
Yes.
Basically, if my reading serves me right, tying income to learning.
Mm-hmm.
And we have it, as you've mentioned, and as we all know, we have a technology that really pretty much, I don't want to say guarantees, but we have a way to improve learning, and in the face with many different children with many different skills that I think would be really worth. If we are on learning commissions, if it was tied to the student learning, our effectiveness would be our security. And I think it'd be interesting. Now, this is how many years prior to No Child Left Behind? This was, now that was accountability of school districts, but
Sure.
This is accountability of teachers. But still, this is basically saying, all right, we want the accountability of our students to be tied to our paycheck.
Yeah.
We want to tie this together. And I don't think the way Og talks here won't be a problem.
Yeah, this thinking, I mean, he says our researchers, our university people should work to find systems to arrange rewards that are tied to the magnitude of behavior change. That is such a huge system change in education. I don't know that that'll ever happen, so I don't know how researchers could affect that. We know we have an incredibly effective technology for producing major change, but yet, if you go into a classroom and you tell some classroom teacher, hey, guess what? If you do this thing, I can make sure that all your kids at the end of the year are reading. That even if you do that, is the teacher going to buy into it? Is the teacher going to do it? I mean, this is just such a huge major overhaul, and I don't argue with the thought here. It just seems unfortunate that we need to have a huge systems change in our field of education so that this is thought of more prominently than it is. I mean, right now, what do we have? I remember listening to Governor Schwarzenegger, and he was seriously trying to talk about a proposal for merit pay, which would kind of be in line with this, where teachers, those who are doing well and are producing outcomes are going to get paid more. Well, the teachers' unions went ballistic against that. And, can you imagine across the United States someone, looking at that? Again, these things aren't perfect, but just even little changes just seem to be so difficult to make in this system that we call education. So it's unfortunate, but I think this problem is going to continue to be a major problem until we have some cataclysmic event that just says, you know what, it is so bad that if we don't do something major, this terrible thing is going to happen. And I hate to think like that, but it just seems that those are the conditions that tend to necessitate major changes. Did I just totally wow you with my trenchant
analysis? No, you didn't
analysis?
wow me. I was just reading this one part again, and you talked about the overall global aspect and saying something has to happen. I was just reading just the fact of looking at one teacher who wants to be a precision teacher. He compares. He says the one that's the more social is the more susceptible to the sort of the social pressures to change and to leave precision teaching. And then his quote here is, who keeps going longest in the face of this counter reinforcement or counter kind of social reinforcement? The nerd, the misfit, the marcher to the different drummer is the most apt to continue basically being precision teacher. And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish, listen to me, but I wish as you said, the sort of the power, being able to walk into a room and say, hey, you know what, everyone can read here, and going from there, see if it takes.
Yeah, so, I just thought about Doug. You and I are total nerds. I mean, this so fits it perfectly.
I would, for those of you listening, he might be a little bit more nerdy than me, but I guess I could be a nerd.
You know what, though? Let's face it. Now, in today's culture, when you call someone a nerd or a geek, it doesn't have the connotations that it used to have when it was written back in 1990.
You're right.
Nerdiness and geekiness is kind of actually cool. I mean, I like the fact that it's taking on a different connotation. There's a lot of movies or TV series like The Big Bang Theory, and where there's the celebration of the geekiness. But this is very true. It's very true.
I wish it could have been that way back in the 90s, but we won't go any further than that.
No. Well, Doug, we have spent a lot of time talking about this article and review on our science news, so why don't we end it here, and let's move on to a fantastic interview with Kimberly Berens. I would like to welcome Kimberly Berens to the Precision Teaching Podcast. Kimberly, welcome.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure to have you on. And why don't we just get right into the interview since we have so much to talk about today?
Okay, that sounds great.
Could you tell us in the audience how you got into precision teaching?
Yes. I first started in the behavioral field in Florida as an undergraduate at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, where I had the privilege of kind of having a mentor as an undergrad because of the size of the school. You actually had the opportunity to work with professors almost like you were a graduate student. And I took a class in learning theory from someone named Maria Ruiz. It was my first exposure to behavioral science, and I became fascinated by behavioral science and really started working with her in a research capacity and theoretically, and doing a lot of extra kind of reading outside of my classes. And then she actually kind of got me connected clinically in the behavior analysis field around my college, and kind of hooked me up with a guy named Ed Blakely, who was the director of a residential treatment center for adults with autism and other kinds of developmental disabilities. So I started working there, and that was when I was first exposed to the use of the 6-cycle chart. And we used that chart in that treatment center mainly to measure and evaluate deceleration targets, so inappropriate behaviors. And I was really fascinated by the use of that system in terms of its standardization. So being able to compare, each client's inappropriate behavior with other behaviors in that class or behaviors in other classes. And I was also interested in kind of comparing, clients with each other and then across environments. It seemed really effective and useful to me. Now we only used the chart for deceleration targets, where we would, because we had the luxury of being able to observe the client for the entire day, because it was a residential treatment center. So it was the most appropriate, obvious measurement tool to use, since you can chart, a day's worth of observations on the chart. So but we did not use it for acquisition. And I was very young. I was an undergrad, so I didn't really question it at the time. But we did only use it for deceleration. So then I was asked to start a school for kids with autism with him. And we did really standard discrete trial stuff. It was really, your typical autism intervention program, discrete trial instruction, percent correct measures. And then we, spent a lot of time entering data into Excel and fiddling around with Excel charts. And, at that point, I was remembering the use of the 6-cycle chart at Threshold at the residential treatment center, and I felt it was so cumbersome using that kind of charting method in the day school for the kids with autism. And so again, I didn't question it. I just kind of kept going with what I was kind of being trained to do as an undergrad. But I do remember feeling that it was ineffective, that I couldn't see. I felt disconnected from the learning environment. I felt disconnected from the learner. I felt like I was spending all my time in data entry and messing around with Excel charts and very little time really in analysis of the data and what was really occurring with my learners. So I did that for several years, and then I went on to graduate school at the University of Nevada in Reno in the behavior analysis program there. And when I arrived, there were 2 graduate students, Christine Kim and Brian Gaunt, who had the luxury of seeing Carl Binder do one of his fantastic presentations at ABAI, which was actually not ABAI then. I think it was still just called ABA then. And they were completely turned on by precision teaching. And so at UNR, it's something called a self-capitalized graduate program where we develop kind of entrepreneurial programs to fund the graduate program because it's not fully funded by the university. So these 2 graduate students decided to start a precision teaching center as a way of bringing in revenue for the graduate for the graduate program, and as a way of like really kind of expanding on this interest that they had developed by watching, by seeing Carl Binder speak. And so I had a practicum in that site. So it was called Advanced Learning Technologies at the time, ALT. And all we did was math, and it was all kind of precision teaching math instruction with typical learners. And those 2 graduate students left very shortly after I arrived at UNR. They went on to get their PhDs at other places, and I continued on with that precision teaching center. And then over the years, and I was still working in autism with Dr. Gezi, Pat Gezi, in a very standard discrete trial, autism program. And again, I just felt so frustrated by the cumbersome nature of the data analysis and the measurement tools and how I felt like I couldn't see anything. And then when I would do my, precision teaching work for my practicum, that's where I felt the most just connected and in control. And I felt the most like a behavior analyst when I was doing my precision teaching work because of the invaluable nature of that measurement system. So I eventually just switched and only did the precision teaching work. I kind of got out of the autism program and moved into the center as a full-time stipend placement. And I really just developed it from that point on we had other graduate students involved, but I kind of was always the front runner in there because I was so interested in it. And there was no faculty at the university who actually supported the chart. No one else was using the chart. I mean, it was really something that I was just doing on my own. And so that's when I, got up the nerve to contact Dr. Lindsley and start kind of communicating with him over email and phone calls. And, he actually became one of my greatest mentors in graduate school. And so he really kind of guided the development of the center along with Carl Binder, and Kent Johnson. I just kind of got a lot of coaching from them, because I didn't have a mentor on campus. I mean, Ted Boyce was my advisor, and he was so supportive of the development of this, but he wasn't, he wasn't trained in this way, and he wasn't a, he didn't use the chart in his other work, which was mainly organizational behavior stuff. So I, just got mentored by, the front runners in this precision teaching community, and I developed a readings aspect to the center, and then we now have 3. I mean, it just got huge, and we actually privatized it outside of the university because there stopped being space and real support for it there in terms of the overall university, not in the behavior analysis program itself. So now we're a private center, and we're affiliated with UNR in the behavior analysis program, but I actually own it and kind of bought it. And now it's my husband and I, Nick Berens, we run the center together, and we have 2 in Nevada, Reno and Carson City, and then 1 up in Medford, Oregon. And we're actually moving forward with an expansion into Las Vegas at this point. So,
wow.
And we have a new autism division where we're doing all this stuff, but with kids with autism, which is, I've kind of gotten back into the autism world. But really using precision teaching based methodologies with those kids. And we even we do discrete trial blocks for initial acquisition, but we chart it all on a chart. So everything we do is charted. Everything we do is steeped in that measurement system. And it's why I believe we've been able to expand so rapidly, why I have 60 different kinds of kids. I mean, there could be typical kids, gifted and talented kids, kids with, more traditional learning disabilities like dyslexia and processing disorders. And then yet, we also have this autism line as well. So it just gives you the flexibility to work with so many different kinds of kids and make discoveries across all those different kinds of learners, because you're looking at things using the same language, basically. So
what do you call your centers now? Do you have a unified name?
I'm sorry?
What do you call your centers? Are they a unified name?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Now we are the Center for Advanced Learning in Nevada. So it's CAL in Nevada, and up in Oregon we are TLC, the Transformational Learning Center, or Transformational Learning Centers actually of Oregon. So we have kind of two names going at this point.
I love the TLC.
Yeah, I would use it more, but the Cal was taken up there and right. TLC wasn't, but TLC was taken in Nevada. So I do like TLC a lot. I think it's kind of a good name.
So here you are just really expanding the use of precision teaching with the many things that you do. How do you manage the charts? Are you all on paper charts, or do you electronic charting? How do you manage that?
We are all on paper charts. I am a very avid fan of the paper chart, and I know it seems very old-fashioned, but I'll tell you that there's nothing that shapes effective instructor behavior like dropping a dot on a chart the moment a behavior occurs with respect to a kid. I think that's why I have very low turnover with my staff. People stay with me for a long time, and then they continue on in this field by going to grad school and specifically wanting to continue, using the chart and precision teaching practices. And I think it's because you are so intimately connected to your subject matter, and you see the power of your instruction, your instructional behavior. The accountability is right there. So there's a huge level of job satisfaction and control, that really comes from the control you get in a learning situation when you know exactly the impact your instruction has on a learner's performance. And you can see that performance immediately, and there's no disconnect. It's not a data sheet that then's transferred to even if you're using a computerized chart, there's a little more data entry involved rather than just intimately like getting your pencil and dropping that dot right where it needs to go. I think it's invaluable. And I know at some point there's going to be a an app on the iPhone, which actually I think would be totally cool, where you have a little chart. Maybe you can just drop your dot, on the chart, but it's an electronic version or something. I'm sure that day is coming, but I will tell you that we have paper charts, and I feel that those are one of the reasons why I have such an effective service and I have such happy instructors, like really satisfied instructors.
Yeah, I think that day is here. Maybe not on the iPhone, but there are people that have really developed a lot of applications for the computer. But I'm of the mind that whatever works is the way to go. Like, I think about how technology affects us, and you could look at books versus audio. Well, not audiobooks, but like the Kindle. We have the technology where everybody could go wireless if they wanted, but I don't know if it's going to happen or what's better. And right now, like what you're doing, it sounds you're obviously getting good results and it's working for you. But I'm just always amazed at logistically you have. I mean, if I were to do the math and we look at you have all of these. It's 3 centers, right? 2 and so 3 centers. You take that per kid at each center. You have a heck of a lot of charts. So.
Oh, it's a lot of charts. Yep.
So how do you handle that volume of, because I'm sure you have to develop like a lot of organizational and structural types of systems just to handle that.
Well, we do. And, it's interesting that you say that, because right now we're dealing with that issue of storage. Because now we've been in operation since, really officially as our independent entity, we opened in 2003. And so now we have, archive charts that go so far back, and I don't ever throw away a chart. So I do have a whole storage unit kind of filled with chart boxes. And so at this point, what, this project we're kind of taking on as soon as I can find some more development money is to scan in charts and create electronic files of scanned charts for kids, and then just discard the paper copy once they're no longer enrolled for a period of time. So that at least it's all on the computer. And, with these scanners these days, it's really quick to just feed those things in. And so it's kind of like when you close a case, the method at this point is, close a case, take the kids' charts, scan them in, into their student file, and then discard the charts, even though it causes me pain to discard the charts. I really hate it. I love keeping charts because, there's nothing like spreading them out on a table and looking at patterns and putting them up on walls. And, when you really want to do some cool analysis of things and, discover some things clinically. But as soon as we kind of have finished doing all that kind of analysis, I think that just scanning it in and getting rid of the paper stuff is the way to go. But again, eventually it would be nice just to have a chart on a handheld device, and every instructor has every kid's file and they just pop it open and then drop it. But I want it to be where there's no data entry. It's like a dot is charted on the chart with like a stylist, because that, again, I think that is what is crucial for instructor behavior. When there's a disconnect, you have to enter in a number into a data sheet, and somehow there's like a disconnect there. And I don't know, maybe I'm old fashioned, but I think that would be the best way to go. Like being able to still drop a dot on a computer chart with like a stylist or something. So. Yeah.
Well, they have that in AIM chart. They've been working on that.
They have.
Maybe not with the stylist, but on a web page. So you take the dot and you literally drop it, which is different from the Excel programs that I've worked with. But I'm with you. When I think about charts, there is an intimate bond that you develop. I know that sounds weird to people who aren't involved in charting, but I have all of my charts. I started off in the mid-'80s with Steve Graff, and I still have my charts from like 1985 when I first started. You just can't get rid of them.
I know. It's really hard. I mean, I have archive charts in a storage unit from kids I first worked with in like 1998. And, those are so precious to me because I remember it was the first time I started really kind of making discoveries and looking at patterns and figuring out, how to categorize different kinds of learners. And it's just, you'll never forget those moments as a precision teacher. So it's hard to get rid of that stuff. It really is.
So what are some of the discoveries or local things that you found interesting lately with your work?
Oh, this is a really exciting thing. I would love to talk about. Well, we at Cal, we made. I mean, I think actually it's pretty common to know that reading fluency, like getting kids up to a high rate in decoding, is very different than comprehension.
That's right.
And although some kids, right, and so although some kids, they come in and they have a reading deficit, and we achieve reading fluency at grade level, and their comprehension completely maps their reading fluency gains. So it's like they had the core language skills, the core comprehension skills in place. They just couldn't read. And so when you establish reading, comprehension was there to be seen. But we have this, a whole other subset of learners that, can decode till the cows come home, still not engaging in complex comprehension skills with respect to materials. So, when we kind of, 4 years ago, we were doing the standard, well, let's target reading comprehension by read a paragraph, answer a question, read a paragraph, answer a question. And, over time, we saw, and we even tried to modify it by slicing down the amount of material they were looking at. And, we did your standard kind of slice it and dice it, precision teaching kind of stuff. And we're getting no effects. We were not getting global, because we do a lot of global progress analyses using curriculum-based measurement, looking at if we're targeting the smaller subset of what we think are comprehension skills, are we getting an impact on more global measures of comprehension? And we weren't getting that. And so we started really thinking about, well, what does it mean to comprehend? What does it mean to do that? What is that core set of skills? And is it really what we think it is, like reading a sentence and answering a question? And no, that's actually an assessment of comprehension. And so we were like, what is really the core of comprehension? And so, we have the luxury of working with some of the most talented people, because I'm affiliated with UNR as an adjunct graduate faculty. And so I have really brilliant people working with me, like Kendra Ricard and Carrie Kalin and Maria Stevenson. They're all PhD students working with me, Molly Halligan, and they bring to the table something more than just working with kids. Like they're bringing in current research and ideas that come out of, more of the basic area in behavior analysis. And so one thing that we started expanding, kind of investigating, was relational frame theory, and how that new kind of theory of language acquisition in behavior analysis that's a little bit beyond verbal behavior, the more traditional approach, how that relates to comprehension, and how does responding relationally in the world relate to comprehension. And so we've done a lot of work over the last 3 years developing something we call the relational learning sequence, which really has to do with training kids who don't have those core language skills in place. They're reading like crazy, but they just aren't comprehending. It's training them from like the ground up in relational operants, basically, training these relational operants. And we are getting the most amazing impact on these just because of the way we measure everything. We train something and then we can run probes across all these untargeted but related kind of operants in a class. And we're getting like times 16, times 20 accelerations on probes, which are unreinforced and unpracticed on probes, because of this core training they're getting in some of these other more basic relational operants that we're training up. And it's some of the most outstanding data I've ever seen. Kendra Ricard is actually running her dissertation on a subset of this program currently, and so we'll have some cool data at AVAI to share on this. But it's pretty much the most exciting thing I think we've ever done in the center, besides really getting our reading program like as tight as it is. In terms of just training up, decoding and good phonemic awareness and word recognition skills. But this is the most powerful thing I've ever seen in terms of discovery of real roadblocks to kids being transformed learners in classrooms. And that's why we use that term transformational learning center, is because, when you're really doing good precision teaching, you transform a child, you transform them as a learner. And one area we were blocked in terms of transforming learners was in that core comprehension ability. And we're really tapping into that now. Kids who have been on the autism spectrum or still are on the autism spectrum, kids who have just more general speech language delay, kids with other kinds of, cognitive kind of issues that are preventing them from developing meaningful social relationships, responding to language that's, even expressive language, even trying to go into expressive writing with these deficits, it just doesn't occur. So, if you can't fix that core skill, they'll never benefit from any further, precision teaching based instruction. It'll just be like rote learning. It won't be real meaningful change. And so this has been the most exciting thing I think we've ever discovered in the center. And the fact that we look at things the way we do, we discover new things every day, like new subsets of skills that we need to introduce into the sequence that make a bigger impact on these global measures that we're evaluating.
So could you give me a specific example of a child who, what would this look like? So
okay.
For the audience, yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Well, we've kind of gone in and set up three kind of core strands, so if you will, and then we have a lot of, like, a huge curriculum hierarchy in each strand, but it's really first comes in describing. So kids come into the center and just their expressive language is not very good. So they look at a picture and they might be able to tell you some of the more basic concrete features that they see, but they can't engage in any more complex descriptions of things in their world. So what we've actually called expanded features and creative functions. So everyone knows about feature function class. So yes. Category, class as being categorization, features being things that you can see about an object or a thing, and then functions being what you do with it. Well, what we have found is that, kids come in and they have this like base ability to describe, but the kids with the language delays or the language kind of issues, they can't go beyond and do these more expanded, descriptions of things. So for instance, if I showed a child a picture of an apple, for instance, and I said, okay, what is this? And they'd say, it's an apple. Right. So that's like pretty much all they could say. And okay, well, what do you do with it? Well, you eat it. Okay, fine. So, but then it kind of stops there. But what we train our kids to do is look at an apple and say, it's an apple, it's round, it's red, it's shiny. You can cut it in half. You can cut it in quarters. You might find it on a tree. You might find it in a grocery store. You could put it in a salad. You could eat it as a snack. You could put peanut butter on it. You could, you could throw it at your brother if he's annoying you. You could use it as a paperweight. You could, do you see what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
we make them kind of go beyond the base description to these more expanded and creative descriptions, and so we train that with like a small set of items, and then we probe their ability to do it with all new kinds of things, and then we also probe how that affects their ability to make comparisons between items, like if they have a picture of a banana and a grandmother, and we tell them, tell us how these two things are the same. Well, kids with language delays are like, what the heck, they're not the same, it's a banana, it's a grandmother. But, you could say a lot of things, like they're both soft, they both have age spots, they can get brown when they age. I mean, like really kind of like crazy, cool things that you could actually derive and compare, but they don't do that on their own. And even kids with typical language development may not do that to the level that they could. And when they can do that better, it affects everything. It affects their expressive language. It affects their ability to derive meaning from what they're reading and make connections between what they've already read. And it totally transforms their ability to write and to be creative in their writing skills. So that's just kind of a one example of a strand we work on, which is really description. And we also do some really advanced kinds of categorization. So, rather than just categorizing things as, as a dog, as an animal, for instance, we have kids categorize lists like, okay, so a pretzel, tears, the ocean, things like that. And we have to, we give them, training to come up with a reason why these things are the same. So like things that are salty, for instance. So, things that kids aren't necessarily doing in terms of categorization. We're kind of training up this more arbitrary categorization, which then allows them to make those more arbitrary connections in the world in language, which can be quite complex and arbitrary in nature.
So if I understand this, you have students who you take them with something like description, and you get them fluent with being able to describe things better, being able to compare things better, and so on. And
right.
Once that happens, that has an effect on their comprehension, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yes. So we'll do like probes, weekly. Well, it depends on how often they come, but, most of the time it's a weekly, application check or probe. I know some people don't like the term probe. So application check. And we'll run a listening comprehension assessment where, we ask them a variety of questions about things, or we'll run a reading comprehension assessment where they're required to read a paragraph and answer questions about it. And we break that we actually use something called the qualitative reading inventory, which is a more standardized assessment of reading comprehension. And it's good because you can do it timed and you can get counts. And it also breaks things apart into like expository versus narrative paragraphs. And then it also breaks it apart into, inferential types of questions versus more factual or direct answers. And so you can see, like, it's really interesting. Some of our initial, more basic programming immediately affects their ability to remember and recall information from paragraphs. It's like, they immediately get better at doing that, that exact recall. But then as they move up on the hierarchy and they get to the more advanced skills, you see an impact on inference and critical thinking, which is like kind of the more abstracted questions that are asked about reading paragraphs or making connections or drawing your own conclusions. And we get that impact later on in the sequence. And so it's really cool to be even able to map when that emerges with a child, because you're running these regular application checks and you have it on a chart. You can see, you can link up in time. Okay, this is when they got to this, they leaped to this level in the curriculum, and all of a sudden you get a burst on inferential skills. So it's really a very fascinating process of discovery.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I see how that would affect not only the reading but also the expressive writing.
Absolutely.
Have you done this with kids that have, for example, thinking about kids with autism who come to the table with lots of, direct, their disability has affected their language, or do you see this more with kids with LD, or have you done this across a range of kids?
We've done this across a range of learners. We absolutely have. And, I'll tell you, some of the first learners we did this with were kids who are on the spectrum. They'd been through early intervention, and then they had transitioned into Cal for academic work. So they were all using language, and it was speech, but they weren't really what we call speaking with meaning and listening with understanding, if that makes sense. They were still very rote kind of responders. And so this program has been highly effective for those kids. And just in there, parents are just getting the parent report information about how, I can't believe the kind of things I can talk to my kid about now, which he wasn't able to respond to before. And also the flexibility. That's another thing we're seeing. And you see that on a chart. And I think Og used to call it, agility, when you'd see, a child going from a low performing to a high performing situation in such a rapid way, and how that actually emerges after being exposed to good precision teaching for a period of time. Like you get steep accelerations when they have that base. And we're actually seeing that as well. Like, these kids develop more of a flexibility with respect to new learning environments because of this language-based training they're getting. So it's been hugely effective for children on the spectrum. And it's been really effective for all other kinds of kids. We have lots of kids coming in with general LD who, their main reason why they have an LD label is because of comprehension deficits. And so again, these are the learners that they also have reading deficits. So they go through the reading program and they're reading it with at fluency at grade level. And then they need to go into this comprehension program to address those issues. So those kids we've been hugely effective with. And now we've actually moved it into the preschool environment. And my son, it was like the prototype kid. He was 3. And, we're starting to do this with 3-year-olds as a means of jump-starting their comprehension skills and making them more ready to benefit from classroom instruction, and just, kind of accelerating their language acquisition. And I can't even explain to you. My son did this program, started in the curriculum, and I think he was in for about 3 weeks when his preschool teacher came up to me and said, "Have you noticed that his language is he's gone a year in language skills over the last few weeks? What in the heck's happening?" And it was amazing to get her perspective, an outside observer, because, we're we see times 16 accelerations on a chart, and then we get that, that social validity measure, and it's really cool. So we're actually trying to develop this as a kind of an enhancement or enrichment program for little kids, as a way to really jumpstart their language skills and get them ready to benefit from classroom instruction. So
So Og's old thing, he was like, let's go for a ×2. And
Oh God,
you're
I know. I
totally
can't.
beyond that.
Oh, you like when Kendra shares her dissertation data at ABAI, I think people are going to fall out of their chairs because, these are not reinforced. They're not, we don't. There's no feedback provided. They're given the opportunity to respond, and they don't practice it. It's all novel materials every time, and I'm not kidding you. It's like the accelerations are the biggest accelerations I've ever achieved down here, and it's not even being directly targeted. So it's really cool as a behavior analyst to see that we have tapped into an operant class. We train one member, and we're getting these emergent outcomes with all these other members in the class. So it's really exciting.
That is the thing with the chart. I was talking in the earlier segment about an article that we do the article review, and we're reviewing this one by Ogden Lindsley, and his quote was really cool. He said, "Everything you look at about behavior is proportional or a multiple. Behavior lives in the multiply world. If you look for behavior in the add world, you will not find it, and you will not know why you didn't." And just listening to you, I just wish more people, and probably not in our community, but other people outside of our community seeing what we do would just really sell them on the value of like talking about those celebrations. I can just see when you talk about ×16, people in our field are like, whoa, that is something that makes your heart flutter because it's just incredibly steep. I think
it's so steep. I mean, people have asked Kendra, are you faking your data? I mean, that is how it just looks so huge. I mean, and the cool thing is, like, when you have that standardized measure, like you and I can talk right now and I can say, yeah, it's a ×16, and you can see that, you can visualize that. That's another benefit, is that we can sit here and talk about a measure, a unit of measurement, and you can picture what I'm talking about, which is not possible on those stretch to fill graphs where, we going from 20% to 80%. I don't know. It's just not the same. Like you can't create that visual image for yourself with that. So. Yeah. I know it's very important. And it's so clear to me, especially in this language acquisition work that we're doing, the multiplicative nature of human behavior. I mean, it's so clear how it accelerates when you have actually identified core operants in a class and trained them to, high levels of proficiency so that they're available for selection and for adduction, for recruitment under different contingencies. I mean, we're seeing all of that, and we're capturing it visually on a chart. It's something that can be captured and seen. So it's like really being able to see the growth of an operant. And I think a lot of behavior analysts, unfortunately, have never seen the growth and development of an operant because they're stuck using the wrong tools. And it's unfortunate because when you really see I now know what it looks like to have identified a new class of behaviors, and how it grows and pops and emerges and gets stronger, and it's pretty remarkable to see.
And this will be published maybe with Kendra's work after she gets her dissertation?
Absolutely. Yes, it will. And we've got so much, I mean, that's our problem is that we I've got this research lab and then I run these centers. It's so hard for the cllinicians of the world. And, and I also have these research divisions it's our bad. So we have multiple things that we really need to get submitted. And that is our New Year's resolution in my lab is to get some of these things out there, and published. So.
Well, it's hard to beat yourself up over that because I work with a school that you're looking for applied outcomes, and a part of you is like, we really want to share this, but you're getting paid to produce applied outcomes, and
exactly
to do something research wise, you need to have it has to be controlled. There has to be a proper experimental design, and so on, and that doesn't always mesh with what goes on in an applied setting where you're trying to get that kid reading.
Exactly. And, again, for us, a lot of the outcome data, a lot of the outcome work we do is really broad scale program evaluations. And again, those are made extremely simple when you use the same measurement tool across the board. And so, a lot of what we do, again, we do a ton of analyses of our outcomes, but those are things that like go on our website or in our, in our learning, in our materials for, our marketing materials and things like that. And so, I spend a lot of my time doing it that way. Because again, like what you're saying, my main commitment is to providing the best service to kids and ensuring that my centers can, continue to grow and flourish and we can continue to expand, because again, there's no one really doing this stuff right now. I mean, if you think about the number of centers that there are now in this country, it is a small number and is diminishing. And it's so unfortunate because of how quickly, I mean, right now we're moving kids a couple years in, kids who don't have an autism diagnosis or something more significant. They're coming in and moving 2 years and 40 hours of instruction. I mean, that's unheard of in the educational world. I mean, kids coming in here, they're reading at a, pre-K level in 3rd grade, and in 40 hours, they're at 2nd grade level. I mean, and it's just, we've been producing that now consistently with our reading program for years. And so it's just, when I think about the number of kids out there that aren't getting good in education in their classrooms, and there's no effective supplementary service for them out there. It's just that's a bummer, especially when a technology like this is so replicable and it's so trainable to people. I mean, it is so easy to teach people to do this stuff. So we're really committed to broad scale expansion of our centers all over the country. So we'll see.
You could get me started on, because I live in the education world every day and I'm in the College of Education, just hearing, just looking at the incredible waste of so much in terms of instructional power that is just wasted on so many kids that are being taught things that we know that don't work, that doesn't work.
Exactly.
And what we have, for example, just listening to you talk, when I have my students, I don't produce as much as results, those kinds of results like you do, but we do still produce pretty impressive results. Anyone that does precision teaching right is going to produce impressive results. And it's like, I see this myself every single semester. I hear people like you, you're producing it. Every colleague like you that's also doing this in for business has similar success stories, but yet in our field, you build a better mousetrap, that doesn't mean that anybody really cares. The only people that care are the parents that have this kid and are lucky enough to find a place like Cal, because if we were to, we could probably on both of our hands, we could count all of the precision teaching learning centers in the United States.
Oh, of course. Yes.
Which is just sad. So I'm really pleased to hear that you're taking a model where, who knows, maybe you'll be able to be like the Sylvan Center and be able to franchise. Yeah, that would be incredible if you could franchise like that and get.
We're really in the we're in the kind of that phase right now where we've got a system, we've got it kind of dialed in, it's replicable. So now it's kind of like make it or break it, go big or go home at this point. So, Nick Berens, he's actually kind of the engine behind, our expansion in terms of the financial kind of business side of things. And so he's been working really closely with a lot of, really high level, serious big time business people. Because let's be honest, like I'm a behavior analyst, I am not an MBA. And unfortunately, a lot of times that's what happens with precision teaching centers, is that they're run by really loving, well-trained behavior analysts, or they may not be behavior analysts, maybe just precision teachers. But anyway, they're not business people. And so, knowing how to grow a successful corporation like that is something that, I don't know about. So we've actually enlisted, some really big time business people. Nick just spent 4 days in San Francisco with this top guy who's helped, grow a lot of small businesses into very big, successful, either franchises or saddle, branch kind of type programs. So, we've got a nice, plan now that kind of grows out till 2030 at this point, with our kind of where we want to be and, where we want to be next year, where we want to be the next year, where do we want to be in 2015, where do we want to be in 2020. And so we're really kind of doing this, we're trying to do this in a better way, I think, than has been done in the past. Like, the mom and pop shops are great, but that's kind of the death of precision teaching, I think, is the mom and pop shop that closes down. when the mom or the pop retires, or the mom and the pop burn out, or and unfortunately, I think that some of the most important discoveries in behavior analysis are going to be made by precision teachers doing this work with clinically. I really believe that. I think there's now this backwards bridge where, with the right measurement tool, and someone knowing what they're looking at, I think the discoveries are going to be made in the applied setting and then filtered back into the more basic science in behavior analysis. And I am firmly committed to not only making these centers available to kids, but to also continuing to promote the use of this technology. And provide great jobs for BCBAs coming out of master's programs to run centers, PhDs in behavior analysis to serve in a research development capacity, or to manage or serve as regional directors for a group of centers in a region. I mean, really creating a dynamic corporation that will ensure the survival of precision teaching practices and standard charting methodologies, and provide an amazing service to the community, and really provide great jobs for behavior analysts. So that's really what Nick and I are committed to doing, and we're trying to do it the right way by really bringing in the people who know how to build a business. And so that's been really exciting for me, because I've learned so much about what I did not know in terms of marketing and things like, marketing and systemization of operations type procedures and things like that behavior analysts don't think about, because we're looking at data all day long on charts. So it's been good. And I really hope, we're feeling hopeful that this expansion will actually work. So.
Wow. Well, when you get that IPO, let me know so I can get in at the ground floor.
I will.
Yeah, that is just so exciting. In our field, it's funny when you do the numbers, and I always think about this. If you think about how many psychologists there are, and we'll just take psychology, and then you say, okay, out of that, what's the proportion of behavior analysts? It's a pretty small number. And then when you take the proportion of behavior analysts who also do precision teaching, you're talking, we could probably fill a hotel with everybody.
Exactly. And so, recognition comes from, obviously, visibility.
Yes.
And so when we're so small, no one even knows about this stuff. And unfortunately, I'm kind of committed to this becoming more popular, not because it's, that's what's being published. I mean, unfortunately, it's hard to get charts published. It's hard in more of our mainstream journals. And so it's kind of hard for us to get visibility that way, so to speak. And I'm not the one who's going to fight that battle, because I'm not a full academic person. But I think that there's another way to get visibility, and that is by creating a very visible, successful, thriving corporation that provides great jobs and great training to undergrads, to grad students, to great jobs to people with masters and PhDs. I mean, that's the way I really want to promote visibility and to make this a more popular approach in behavior analysis. And because I think that I think it'll be well, it's not something I can access. I mean, that's something I can do because I'm more of a clinician. And I think that the kind of publishing it and trying to get it out that way has not been as effective. So I'm thinking this might be a better road to take at that. And then at that point, we'll be, I don't know, maybe that'll be the key to getting this stuff more out there in terms of publications and research and things like that.
I agree with you. They're hitting this on multiple ends. Like when you think about these big issues, there's never this one solution. There are multiple solutions. And
right.
I everything you say, I'm in total agreement with. So I am very excited to hear what you all are doing, and I'm sure you two are really excited because that is just a very cool opportunity to be able to,
yes.
Talk to people in terms of marketing and see where
right.
they're going. And yeah, hey, just thinking about switching gears here, we are starting to get close to the end of our interview, and I always like to ask if there's anything that I could have asked you or anything you'd like to say that we didn't have time to talk about.
Well, actually, this is kind of a cool piece of information. So we have this, autism division now that we're really kind of developing in a bigger way right now through the centers. And there was a bill that just recently passed in Nevada that requires insurance companies to pay for the treatment of children with autism using ABA methods.
Yes, that passed
so now
in
there's
our
a law
state this past year.
Yeah. Oh, good. So as part of that bill is mandated the licensing of behavior analysts and assistant behavior analysts, and actually front-level interventionists are going to have to be certified at the state level. And so part of that bill was that a behavior analyst is appointed to the State Board of Psychological Examiners and assists in the, number one, the developing of the licensing regulations, and then number two, the actual licensing and regulating of these individuals. And I was actually appointed by the governor as that person. So it's kind of cool because now it's like a precision. I know. So like a minority person, like the precision teacher, behavior analyst person, I'm actually involved in writing those regs, and that's been a really exciting thing as well, because I've had to interact with a lot of traditional psychologists, and they're becoming educated in not only behavior analysis, but the benefits of this measurement system that we use. And I think I'll have the opportunity to kind of influence some of the other practitioners in Nevada in terms of kind of the measures that they use, and trying on new things, kind of moving outside of the discrete trial box and things like that. So that's really, it's been very exciting. It's been very time consuming, and it's a political game, obviously, that has to be played, but it's been really, really exciting. And I was just honored to be appointed to that. So I thought I'd share that with you. Let
me congratulate you. And wow, that is just incredible, because that's such a visible place. And not only that, you have such an opportunity to make a significant impact in a very important legislation.
Yes, it's been really, really exciting. And I know that, this is going to be happening in a lot more states where there's going to be behavior analysts appointed to these boards and involved in the state licensing of behavior analysts. So it's been really exciting to have the opportunity to be really the first one to do that and kind of experience what that's like, and then hopefully kind of share my knowledge with other individuals that are going through this in other states. Because it's actually been a really great experience. And, we kind of have this whole view of traditional psychologists, and it's like this, sometimes it's a little adversarial and behavior, but it's been really exciting to see how really traditional psychologists are fascinated by behavior analysis, and they're really actually very interested in some of the approaches we use. Like, for instance, most of the licensing of psychologists occurs via paper and pencil exams, correct? Mm-hmm. But before our front, and this hasn't quite yet been accepted by the Legislative Counsel Bureau, but the board has voted on this, so we'll see if it goes through. But one of the requirements of the certification of interventionists, which are really just the people who work in the chair with kids, is that they actually have to pass a practice-based audit that is conducted by their supervising behavior analyst, and then those results are submitted to the board, and there's a videotape submitted to the board so that the board can review the videotape if they want. But it's practice-based. It's actually like them in the chair doing, that's mainly what we do when we're training our staff anyway, but this is not something the board has ever done. They have never looked at a practice-based proficiency requirement for any level of licensing, and they voted on it and accepted it. I actually should say we voted on it and accepted it. And also now they're talking about how exciting that would be for traditional psychologists in their licensing, because there's a lot of issues going on now in APA about how licensing doesn't necessarily guarantee quality therapists, and how do you translate what happens in a therapeutic setting to a paper pencil exam. So the fact that this board has now accepted a proficiency, like a practice-based proficiency audit or evaluation, was really exciting. And they're kind of talking about it in more in grander terms. So it's almost like behavior analysis is like infiltrating a little bit. And I think that's kind of cool. So
wow. Well, you're gonna have to keep us all updated on that. And when I have you on next in the future, you can let me know what happened, and by then, well, you should pretty much have things solidified. Is your state in this? You passed it, and now what are they exactly working out? Just
okay. The bill officially went through in May, and I was appointed to the board in September. And since that time, I've just been working with the board on writing the licensing regulations for there's 3 levels of people included in the bill. So it's the board certified behavior analyst, board certified assistant behavior analyst, and then we're calling them the autism behavior interventionists. So those three levels of individual are getting licensed or certified at the state level. And so we've just been kind of going back and forth and writing, the requirements for that. So, what are the requirements for their education? What are the requirements for supervision? What are the requirements for ongoing, continuing education? What is the licensing exam going to entail, and things like that. So we've actually, that took us until our last meeting in December, and we finally completed those regulations and all voted on them. And now they've been submitted to the Legislative Council Bureau for their approval. And then once they get approved, we'll move forward with the generation of the exam, and kind of writing all these, kind of formalizing all of these things. And then we'll start, with the licensing kind of process with people. So we're moving forward. And insurance companies are required to start paying in January 2011. So, but we're going to start licensing people as soon as possible. We're hoping to start licensing people no later than June. So that all kind of gets systematized, and once the insurance mandate kicks in, everyone will be kind of ready to go. So,
yeah, this whole legislation, when you look at how it's sweeping across the nation, not all states have it, but as you pointed out, a lot of states is just really good for behavior analysis in our field in general. I mean, it serves
really
as a vindication that yes, our science is legitimate. Yes, it can produce these outcomes. I mean, certainly, I hope what happens is behavior analysis isn't just autism-centric, because we could do this with everybody.
Well, and that's a great point, because another thing that Nick and I are hugely committed to, and really that's one of my hopes with respect to our big expansion that we're trying to do, is that we get more and more outcome data with other kinds of learners, that we may not do in necessarily a controlled, research way at first, but if you replicate these findings over enough kids, you're going to convince people. And I mean, we transform the learning abilities of kids with dyslexia, kids with auditory processing disorder, kids with Down syndrome, kids with mental retardation. There's no reason why every single one of those kids should not be able to use insurance to cover our intervention when speech therapy is covered for kids like that.
Exactly.
So we're really committed, and I think that's another thing, that's one of the reasons why I really fought to get this appointment to this board, and, kind of finagled my way in there, by being kind of annoying probably. No, but, because I really wanted the experience of, getting that kind of position, and being able to directly interact with insurance companies at that level, so that then we can kind of start submitting, well, hey, look, it's effective for autism treatment. Check out these outcome data on kids with dyslexia. How much money are you spending on speech path for like however many years they go? And this is how much you could spend on us, and it's 40 hours. So, I think there's a way for us to kind of piggyback on this whole autism thing and really get some stuff accomplished for other kids, and just having ABA be a common treatment for kids, and covered by insurance. I think that's so important for behavior analysis.
Well, thank you, Kimberly, for spending all of your time. I know you're really busy, and I really appreciate you talking with the audience. And on behalf of the audience, let me say that this was a wonderful interview. We learned a lot, and hopefully you'll come back and talk with us again in the future.
I love that. Thank you so much for asking me to be on. It was a pleasure.
Well, once again, thank you for joining the Precision Teaching Podcast.
Thank you.
As I said before, that was a fantastic interview, and as you've just heard, I didn't lie, did I? I was talking to you, Doug.
And you just heard, I was thinking about something to say in a little bit. Yes, it was great.
Man, you're all over the place today. What are you doing? Playing the Wii or something?
Well, you know what? I changed my environment for doing the podcast, and it definitely changed the behavior. So.
Okay. Well, you better change it back. I need my Doug on the ball.
Okay.
Well, Doug, I think that brings us to the end here, unless you have something else to add.
I just wanted to wish everyone, you'll probably be listening to this after the new year, but I hope everyone has a wonderful new year and gets a good start for 2010. and hope you had a great 2009.
Well said. I can't top that, Doug, so I'm going to leave that be. On behalf of Doug Kosowitz, I'm Rick Cabina, and I thank you for listening to the Precision Teaching Podcast.